Hey, welcome back to another edition of AGI Schools Out Saturdays, where we talk to the people who are educating our children and planning those systems about preparing kids for their future, or students in this case, for their future, not our past. I'm here today with Anne Leftwich, who is the Associate Vice President of Educational Technologies at Indiana University. That's a mouthful. And you guys got a big award at the Miro Award at Tech Point not too long ago, and I was absolutely thrilled. So why don't you introduce yourself and kind of what you've been doing at IU, and then we'll dive in.
Sure. So my name is Anne Leftwich. I am AVP for Learning Technologies at IU within UITS. So I directly report to our CIO and Vice President for Information Technology. I'm also a professor in the School of Education. I'm in the Instructional Systems Technology Department and an adjunct in computer science at Indiana University. And I've been there for over 20 years now. My research has tended to focus on K through 12 technology adoption, diffusion, and computer science education and AI education. I started this new position about 3 years ago, really trying to focus on and help us figure out how should we be utilizing AI in particular in education at IU. What tools should we be using? What should we be thinking about? And really trying to help guide faculty in reimagining what we're doing.
That is awesome. And you guys got what was the Miro Award for incorporating OpenAI's ChatGPT across campus. Is that correct? Tell us a little bit about that
Yes.
initiative.
So I think there are a couple of different things we received the Miro Award for. So around our AI initiatives in general at IU that we're doing. Um, so we did have OpenAI. We were the second largest adoption of that at the university level. Um, but I think more so the thing that really put us on the map was something that our president, Pam Whitten, actually put forward and suggested. It was for the GenAI 101 course. And this is a course that really focuses on taking students, faculty, and staff all the way from very beginning, first time opening up your browser and opening up the tool all the way to actually building your own AI agent. And so she really wanted a course that could prepare folks to have those skill sets to be real contenders at Indiana University. And that took off like wildfire. And has really amped up what we're able to do. And not only that, but she had her entire cabinet take it, and it's gone across campus and really has been highly recognized. Even different companies adopting this particular curriculum and moving forward with it. So it's based on 3.5 hours of videos. We completed all of it in under 66 days. And Dr. Brian Williams is the brainchild behind the curriculum and is also the face of it. And we also have a really adorable mascot called Crimson, which is our AI robot that kind of floats in the background and offers a little bit of comic relief.
That is awesome. So there's three different conversations that I think I want to have, and we'll start with your graduation and with your president. But one is around students and like just the general student vibe towards AI that we've seen. One is around the education space, and then I just came from the Fever Conference here in Indianapolis today with a bunch of K through 12 educators. So with your
Mhm.
background in that, I wouldn't mind touching on that a little bit at some point in time as well. But I was my soon-to-be daughter-in-law, I think, graduated from IU School of Nursing,
Mm.
and we have a couple boiler kids in our household. But my daughter, who has her PharmD from Purdue, got her undergrad at IU, so we're kind of a house divided. Huge supporters of all Indiana education, but. President Whitten did mention that the soft skills that kids were learning was going to help empower them in a world driven by AI. And there were no boos, there was no like major crowd reaction. But if you look at like Eric Schmidt and some of these got people that have gotten up and given commencement speeches recently who have been received huge amounts of boos from the student, like what's what in your mind, in the educational mind, like what's going on with kids? Are they just scared? Is it all of the horrible rhetoric that Sam Altman and Dario Amodei have thrown out there about getting rid of all jobs? Is it a combination of things? Is it the environmental impact? Where do you see kids are with this? Why do they hate it so much?
Yeah. So I think the fascinating part, especially in higher education, is most people will talk about how, well, AI is facing all this resistance from faculty, but there's quite a bit of resistance too from students. I would say it's a little bit, it's fewer students maybe than what I might determine our faculty, but it still is definitely a hefty amount. And it's coming from in my mind, a place of either fear or not fully understanding or not fully engaging in the AI talks and discussions. Um, so some of it is definitely the fear of jobs, right? What is my job going to look like? Am I going to have a job? Is it going to be replaced by AI? And most people, regardless of whatever your field is, someone else will say, "Oh, well, I can imagine AI taking over the role of this person, but not my area, right? My area is too important for an individual to do." So, I think that part of it of this is the career that I wanted, this is what I imagined that career would be, and AI can take that and flip it on its head. So that's a really uncomfortable thing. I think the next part is when they're actually in classrooms and students are seeing their peers use AI and when they're not supposed to be using AI, and then those peers end up getting a better grade in the class, that also creates some consternation of should I be, if I use AI in the way that these other students are using it, it's going to deplete my knowledge, right? It's going to make it so that I don't have a firm grasp or understanding. So one of the common examples has been in a foreign language. So if I have if a student and another student in the class does their French assignment and they end up getting an A because they used AI, and I did the actual assignment and learned the actual knowledge and I got a B, that doesn't seem fair, right? But when those students leave and go on to whatever it is and maybe go to France, they'll be able to speak the language, whereas this person that, used the AI, I don't know, maybe they use an AI tool to help them do that. But um so I think some of those parts are also adding to consternations. There's the same parts around environmental concerns. There are ethical concerns about what does this mean for me as a human and learning and different parts there. So, um, my I whatever your concerns are with AI, I think many of them can be valid as long as folks have actually done the research on that, right? So a lot of people will say, we'll throw out the environment one, for example. But then I'll also ask, well, are you constantly streaming on Netflix? Do you know what the impact is there on the environment? Um, do you eat bacon cheeseburgers? Do you know what the impact is of those on the environment? So I think whatever you decide is your reason or rationale, it should be an informed decision or reason and rationale, right? And not just picking up one article or looking at one thing. Um, so yeah, I think that there is a lot of things that we have to be thinking more so about when it's okay to use it, when the human should be involved, where the human in the loop should be. And my big piece is always that if you don't understand AI or refuse to use AI, then how can you be included in those conversations about how it should be used or what this looks like? There's there's actually there was a common video that I used to use in my pre-service teacher education course, where it had Congress had called in the Google CIO and the Facebook CIO, and were asking them questions about technology. And it was fairly obvious that the people in Congress didn't
Had no
necessarily
idea.
understand how the technology works. So
Yes.
this always comes back to me of if you want to be part of the solution, you have to understand all of the pieces of the problem and why it's a problem or what we should be thinking about, because otherwise it is the tech companies or the people that are making these things that are driving how it's used and how it's going to influence our society.
Yeah, I wasn't going to go this big on this conversation, but so this podcast has been running for 2 years. So I've talked to a lot of educators, everyone from
Yep.
Magic School to School AI and some of the ed tech, but mostly it has been educators from universities either here or in Ohio, because Ohio was a bit ahead of us last year. And I was a little concerned about Indiana. This year, we have really leaned in across the state and caught up. But if I look at a big change like this in society, something as impactful, I mean, even Bill Gates, these guys have said this is bigger than the internet. This is the biggest thing that's ever happened in my lifetime. This is going to change society. Indiana, to me, seems ideally set up from a university system to help Hoosiers go through the transition through this. So if you look at Purdue University as almost the MIT of the Midwest, right? They've got the software engineers, they've got the tech stack to handle that side of. They've got the whole drone program and all that. If you look at Indiana University, like healthcare is going to be a huge place where humans don't get replaced for a long time, and where data privacy and ethical conversations are going to happen exponentially, as well as law. And you've got law school down there. And then if you look at the environmental impacts, like I do feel like that needs to be a conversation led by some. I mean, golf courses use 5 times the water that data centers use in the United States of America today. So I
That's a
could not agree more with the idea that we're uneducated on where we pick and choose to villainize environmental damage. And then Notre Dame University, and with the Pope's recent statements, I mean, I think they're trying to tackle some of the philosophical side of things from that standpoint. And so we are so set up as a state to really lean into this conversation, but we do need to have more pragmatic conversations about how to safely and equitably deploy this stuff
Yeah. So
instead
there,
of polarization.
yeah. So the Lilly Foundation, the Lilly Endowment Foundation actually put out a call for all universities um, to have implementation grants around artificial intelligence. So we submitted ours in May 1st was the deadline, and so we spent pretty much the past from January on really collecting data, talking to different people, identifying what is going to be our strategy. And we had already started doing lots of these things at Indiana University, but this really helped put it together. We had over 120 faculty, staff, and students established across 4 different work streams. And so the first work stream was focused on change management, right? Like this, it's not necessarily, at least for me, it is not about forcing people to teach AI or to include AI in their curriculum. It is more about getting people to acknowledge that AI has changed the game, both in the classroom setting, but also in the way in which our students are going to interact with society once they graduate. So it's fine if you have strong feelings against AI and you want to focus on those durable human skills, but it can't be in the way in which we've always taught it, right? So having a lecture and then having somebody produce some kind of an artifact to showcase their learning, that doesn't work, especially in the higher education space, because your students are going off into back to their homes, being able to use whatever tools they want to. So you really have to think about, how are we using our in-class time? What is the value add for higher education if many of these tools, like one of my favorites is Google Notebook, where I'm able to put in any kind of an article or a dense text and then get a personalized podcast that has banter. I always like a good pun included in there for me, lots of examples. And so this is a fantastic way for me to consume this information and interact with it in a way that might be more personalized, more relevant. I'm going to get more from it than even the best lecture. And believe me, I love to give a good lecture. Like it's really it's exciting, it's enthusiastic, it's engaging with the rest of the students. But we really have to think more deeply about what the value is of higher education, what we are serving, and how do we mentor and facilitate students' knowledge and growth in a different way than we have before.
Yeah, I love that. And it reminds me of a couple of things. First off, the session that I led today with a local high school principal who's implemented Google Classroom and School AI in their school was around two questions. One, which is why, if a 10-year-old asks, why do I have to go to school? Meaning the K through 12 school, like what is our
Yes.
answer to that? And then the second one being around like what can employers reasonably expect from a high school graduate? What skills can they reason? But then we went into, okay, here is a tool that you can use in your classroom that will not only help you, but will also help kids understand hallucinations versus RAG. It will help with multimodal AI generation. And it was Notebook LM. Notebook LM, I think, is like the unsung best place to start with AI tools.
It it really is, and I've used it in a wide range of different approaches. So I have two sixth graders; they just graduated, going into seventh grade, and an eighth grade son that will be going into ninth grade here. And so I've used it in a wide range of ways in order to help them prepare for my sixth grade daughters. We took The Old Man and the Sea and put that in there because that's a copyright free book by this point in time. And then I was able to create different types of comic book settings, right? And different queries that they could interact with it, and even a podcast that translated it to what are some of the themes that we might see in your daily life, and how might these things connect, right? And even just showcasing those before the students then read the text, they're able to process it in a different way and understand the themes that are coming out in the language, and do that in incredible different ways. I also one of the things that I just created for my daughters also this summer was I interacted with Claude. I took their NWA test scores, their iLearn test scores, their report cards to showcase their math skills, because they're skipping 2 grades of math, and I want them to work with a tutor so that they can kind of ramp themselves up for being prepared for algebra. And then I asked Claude to then take into consideration what are some of the skill sets that we know are predictors of algebraic success at the high school level, and then also look at best practices as it comes to mathematics. And what else the tutor needs to know for that particular information. So it came up with this beautiful. Oh, and also I put the curriculum that they had used from sixth grade, seventh grade, and eighth grade math, so that they knew where the alignment would be for algebra. And it came up with these absolutely beautiful documents, which are all challenge based, they had really clever questions identifying different areas. There were confidence measures on it. It had all of the graphs and the number lines already put in there. And then also at the end of it, it had information for the tutor too. Oh, and they also had to explain their thinking, right? Because that's the other thing that the tutor needed to see, like how and why are they thinking or going through this process. Really impactful what it was able to produce. And then again, for the tutor, it had, here's an explanation of like what you might be seeing and how you might take this, and what it might look like. It just every day it becomes more and more powerful on how we can personalize learning for our students. It's just
Yeah,
incredible.
I couldn't agree more. And now, because I'm sure you have somewhat of a technical background looking at your title, I do not. I cannot read code,
Mhm.
SQL, any of that. But I can now take something like that and say, present this to me as an app in HTML, and it's an interactive, beautiful document. Well, beautiful is questionable. If you go to Codex and ChatGPT, you'll get the aesthetics. But Claude, functionality wise, like I use Claude Design all the time. My boss and I go around to different nonprofits that we are trying to showcase our AI app to, and I will just have it set a course for the day. I'll say, like, here's the radius, here's the dollar amount of their annual revenue, the of organizations we're targeting, and not only will it map it out, it will give it. And I didn't even ask for it. It will give us like a summary as to why our app works for their organization, like talking points
Yes.
before we walk in the door. Like that. That is that the the shift in November of last year with Opus 4.7 and Claude Code and Cowork,
Mhm.
I think when I really started to say, wow, like this is the whole vibe coding thing. You don't have to be, yes, to deploy it at scale through in a 10,000 person company, you're still going to need a software developer in the loop. But right now, for personal use, it is amazing. But it does lend to the, like, what are the skills of the future? Because I have started to think, I've told my daughter, the two things I've told her, she's 15 years old. She's a freshman at Carmel. She'll be a sophomore at Carmel High School. And she first came to me, and like one of my proudest moments, not this one, but the next one, she first came to me and said, Dad, I am using ChatGPT. Because I kept asking. Carmel has not put it in their schools yet, and that's problematic in my opinion. Their teachers have had training for 2 years on it, but their kids are not allowed to use it. And I said, Mia, the only two things you could tell me about AI that would bother me is that you're not using it at all, or that you have some kind of weird relationship and you think that there's something inside that box that there isn't, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and then later she came to me like it's 3 months later and was trying to figure out the UX on the Claude app on her phone. I was like, why? I thought you were ChatGPT. She goes, well, ChatGPT just kind of tells me what I want to hear, and Claude is much more useful. And I was like, look at that. You
Yeah.
learned on your own.
Yep. I've actually, 2 years ago, my daughters were part of the elementary school team, the CS for Social Good challenge, and they actually created an app that would allow fifth graders to ask questions because they're starting to develop more independence and things like that. So they developed a ChatGPT app that included their vernacular, that would be Socratic in its questioning. And then when they started to ask it questions, they noticed that it wasn't giving them the answers that they thought that it should answer. So it was asking them, for example, like, I have a thing where I've asked them not to share their water bottles because like germs spread really quickly, right? So don't share your water bottle. And so then they asked ChatGPT that question and it came back with, sure, go ahead and share away. So they said, well, that's not right. And they went back and they put in like, here are some things that are appropriate for fifth graders. Don't share your water bottle. And then they asked it a question about dating. And then it came back with a question and they're like, well, we're not allowed to date in fifth grade. That's ridiculous. So they went back and trained it. And so a couple of iterations with that. And then about a week later, they came up with this response, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. They said, well, if we're going back and training this and telling that it can't, like it can't do dating advice and it can't share water bottles, what about for the kids whose parents say that it is okay to do that, right? So they're recognizing that the bias that is in there is based on the people that are coding it. So that was another like mind-blowing moment that kids understand technology so much better than I think we give them credit for. And especially if we start pulling out those ideas and trying to get them to think about what's actually going on here, what's happening, of where is this data coming from? It's coming from your Alexa and it's coming from different things. And even if you look at even preschool students, they're already figuring out how to adjust their language so that Alexa gives them what they want, right? So my kiddos, we didn't have an Alexa in our house because I'm nervous about the data collection piece of it. But my parents did. And so when they went to my parents' house when they were really young and they wanted to play a song over and over again, they realized that they had to change their enunciation because Alexa couldn't understand them. And then they had to ask it in different ways, right? Of like, play this song, but it has to be by this particular person. So they're already at such a young age figuring out how to get the output that they want. It's just wild to me.
It's amazing. I mean, they're learning prompt engineering. They're learning Socratic argument. I didn't learn about Socratic argument until sophomore year of high school. I took a
Yes.
philosophy class, right? So
Yes.
I do think that's where the tool can become strong. When you were talking about the language thing and the kids next to you using a language model for a foreign language, I was thinking, okay, but that depends on your approach. Because if I went home, turned on ChatGPT voice and practiced Spanish with it 2 hours a day, I
Hmm.
would be phenomenally better without having hired a personal tutor. I taught a class for some high school kids up in Lafayette, Indiana, not too long ago, and I could tell one of the kids was Russian because his accent, and he seemed like he was bold enough kid that he wouldn't be embarrassed. But I was like, hey, I turned on ChatGPT voice and I was like, say something to me in Russian because a lot of the kids and a lot of the teachers have not been exposed to much AI,
Mhm.
and he did. And for like 3 minutes, he's going back and forth with ChatGPT in Russian, and everyone's jaw was just on the floor. And
Yeah.
it's amazing that it can do things like that.
I do think to your point too about the banning of AI in schools. I think really is to our own detriment. Like I know a lot of schools that are using magic,
Hmm.
magic, yeah.
Magic School.
Um, yes, and so which I think that's great, but many of them like there's time limits on it, right? The students are only using it for the when the teachers open it up for this allotment of time. And then the kids are going home and using it to explore, to ask questions, to do other sorts of things. That the thing that is fascinating to me is that it's we have two completely different paradigms when we're talking about K through 12 education and higher education. Higher education, man, if you're not using your in-class time to do actual work to see what the students understand and know, it's a huge missed opportunity because they're outside of your classroom for so long, and the things that they're doing outside of your class is really challenging to measure what's happening and where the knowledge gains are. In K through 12, you have a captive audience there for a longer amount of time, and the time that they're outside of school, they're not doing as much, right? Or I mean, there's homework and but there's after school sports,
Sure.
there are other things. So really it's that in class time. And so if you're not teaching students how to use it responsibly, just like the internet, just like anything, right? Um, we all know that banning of things and the abstinence of things like that does not work and for most students, right? We have to be thoughtful in terms of teaching them and saying how we're engaging and then also the why. So the why for me is important for any level of education that you're in. If you're going to tell me that I can't use AI, you have to tell me why, right? Why and why is it critical for me to learn this skill, right? Why is it critical for me to learn cursive? Um, is that a critical skill? Is that important? If you tell me it is important because it helps cognitive development, and we've shown that like connecting letters and all of these things, then I'm bought into it, right? I'm like, okay, I can do that. But the I feel like a lot of times we just fall back on, well, you have to do it because I learned it or because that's what the structure or the system is, right? Of because I said so, as opposed to thinking about think of the difference if you go into a class and they say, look, this is an English 100 level course. It's really critical that you're developing your own voice because if you don't have your own voice and know what your voice, your tone or your style actually is, then when you actually go out to craft something, it's not going to sound like you. It is going to sound like AI, and people are going to start noticing that, right? There's if it's not X, then it's Y. It's all of these, and we used to know it by the M dashes, and we used to know it by like specific word choices, right? And we're going to continue to see that.
Well,
So
it's the little
unless you,
periods instead of commas
yes,
in between
yes.
every two words.
Yes. So unless you establish your own voice, like that is going to be critical, a critical loss for you. However, so I don't want you to use it for brainstorming. However, if you would like to use it for editing your actual drafts, you can do that. But I just want to see a transcript of what you originally submitted, what the AI said, and then what you changed and what you learned from that interaction, right? Like that changes the game in terms of me talking to you about how to use AI to help you with the process of writing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and actually, it's a very marketable skill. So I've talked to a lot of, I have a background in social media marketing. I'll talk to a lot of nonprofits are another one that push back against AI.
Mm.
They seem to feel that it's disingenuous, and I'm like, yeah, I see what you're saying. When a CEO puts a LinkedIn post out, and I can tell that he just had ChatGPT whip it up and it's full of
Mhm.
M dashes and not X but Y. I'm like, how could you be as educated and responsible as you are and put this garbage out? But the flip side of that is, like, I can show you how to curate enough of your actual written posts and whatnot to
Mhm.
develop a tone, voice, and style guide that a large language model can follow, that will make it so that you pretty much cannot tell that your company did not write the majority of this, or it will just take a basic human editor. And I always say, to people who push back on the marketing front, I'm like, listen, you're just becoming the editor of a newspaper. You have a
Yeah.
bunch of reporters working for you instead of having to be the individual reporter. If you want to handwrite your newsletter, you have every right. The editor can publish whatever they want, right? But you also can publish a lot more stuff and reach a lot more corners that you maybe previously didn't have time to reach, because you have these large language model little reporters at your fingertips. And if you train them well enough, you won't have to edit it much, and it saves a ton of time and it's very efficient.
Yeah. I think some of the challenges become when people see the AI slop that folks will just produce, right? So, like you were talking about the LinkedIn posts that are fairly obvious of what that is. So, one of the things that we talk about again in that Gen AI 101 course is the importance of the human in the loop, but then also that it is the humans that are ultimately responsible for that. So, whatever you take from AI, if you just want to pass that off as your own work, you're still held responsible for whatever that is, right? And really, that's been our approach at IU, is to really think about that we're grounded in this belief that AI should amplify the human potential and not diminish it, right? So focusing around liberal arts, and thinking about that our students aren't just learning to use AI, but they're learning to question it, to challenge it, and then again to go back to like shape its impact on society.
Yeah, well, law is a great place to make those examples too, because we've seen some lawyers get hit with some pretty hard fines for stating case law that didn't exist.
Absolutely. Yep.
So one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking, and that I don't hear enough conversation about, and this is a K through 12 conversation, right? But sycophancy and anthropomorphism. I fear we already have the anxious generation. We look back on the social media mistakes that we made, and
Mhm.
now I know Mattel has like Barbie dolls and things that have large language models in them. They haven't sold them yet, but they exist. So are we thinking about what does it mean for a 5-year-old to be able to have a conversation with a doll in natural language that is could pass a Turing test times 10? And how are we going to age appropriately teach them what's going on underneath the hood so that they don't start to think that there's something sentient in there? And then the second part of that is that we also have a whole generation of kids that we say we gave them trophies for participation and that didn't work out very well. Well,
Mhm.
sycophancy is kind of that on steroids, right? If every idea you have is a great idea, or if, the worst case scenario, I know Snapchat at one point in time encouraged young girls to date older men against their parents' wishes just to
Yeah.
agree with them. Like, how do we start preparing kids to interact with something that communicates so clearly in natural language?
So on the point around trying to have something that's more critical, um, most many people have referred to me as Pollyanna or Mary Poppins, like, I live in a happy bubble. But I really make sure that my, AI tools are all, telling me like it is, being very, critical of my ideas. I say I don't want sugarcoating. I want only evidence, right, based. I want you to question everything that I'm doing. So I bake that into my own model, because I do want to be challenged. And one of the things that we've also looked at, and this is heavy into that Gen AI 101 course, is to really look at it as a thought partner. So asking AI for ideas and then asking the AI to help me evaluate those ideas or challenge those ideas. I think that's one of the places where we can show and model to students how to have those conversations. And again, I think that has to happen in the K-12 space because as we've shown through social media, we can't necessarily rely on all parents having engagements and discussions with their kids about that, right? And they are away from us for a certain amount of time too, and we allow them to be longer and longer on devices. For me, I actually, as my kids started using AI, they would log into mine and I would see their chat history, right? So with one of my daughters, I saw her ask for like an I can't remember, it was an answer to a question or like a summary of the book so that they could put it in their book summary. And so I followed up on that and I said, "Hey, so can you tell me a little bit when you're using AI like this, what are you trying to accomplish?" And she said, "Well, I'd already read the book, and I couldn't remember this one piece, so I asked it to kind of summarize this one piece, and I wanted to make sure that it was in there." So that opened us up to have a discussion around how we could utilize it, what that would look like. My son used it for, I thought it was a really creative purpose where a he had to write a play that would showcase a couple of different thematic things that were coming out that to emphasize the vocabulary that they were using. And so he wrote the first two scenes and then he put it into AI and he said, "What might be some different ways, like branches of stories? Give me a couple of different options that could showcase these particular themes," right? And then he picked from those themes and then he wrote it up in his own words. So I think if we're showing students how to use that as a thought partner, or for example, we all used to have, here's the math problem and here's the answer in the back of the book, and you didn't know how to get from one step to the next, right? Now, what I can do is I can upload that and actually have a conversation. I don't understand why it's like that. Can you make some kind of a visualization for me that's showing me how this is working and how it's moving in this direction? So, if we teach our students how to use it in that way, I think it's a little bit easier to showcase that. We also have so my work is in artificial intelligence, especially at the elementary ages, and we have an NSF curriculum that's focused on third through fifth grade to teach students artificial intelligence within the context of life sciences. So it's been a really great way for us to showcase to students, here's how computer vision is working. So here's how computers actually understand things, and it goes through analogies with life sciences. So for example, how does a snake understand what's in front of it, right? Like it doesn't have the same kind of vision that we do. It has infrared so that it can see heat, right? Of whether, so if the number's higher or it's like, warmer, then obviously it's still alive. And if it's lower, then it's more likely dead. Or it also senses vibration. So if it hears big booming, right? So the higher that particular level is on a mathematics scale, likely to be a predator. And if it's lower, then it's your prey, right? So we talk about, like, even with bats and echolocation, the way in which we see things is we're processing things through computer vision, and it's legit. Computers are doing this all through numbers, right? And so that's how it's built in. And we show them some different like unplugged activities through machine learning, as well through reinforcement learning, by doing like playing the hot and cold game, right? Hiding something somewhere. So you're knowing where to go by me reinforcing, yes, hot, hot, colder, right? So
Oh,
these
I
are
love
all
that.
like the different reinforcement things. So conversations around it, I think, are the critical ways for our students to understand what's actually happening and going on under the hood.
Those are some awesome ideas. So I've wanted. Do you remember Schoolhouse Rock? How Bill became a law?
Yes, fantastic.
I've wanted to redo how a transformer became an LLM, like
I love
for
that.
K through 6, just to kind of show, because I do think somewhat of an understanding of what's going on underneath the hood is kind of paramount to
Mhm.
understanding that these things are just algorithms, but also the show your work thing. That's another thing that I've talked a lot of people who say, show your work, and I have to think, well, in math, right? Like we've always had to show our work. You couldn't just turn in the answer to a problem. You had to show how you got there. considering the fact that large language models are all math underneath, much to my dismay. I actually thought they were, before I understood anything about them, I actually thought they were processing things in language, but computers do things in numbers. Like, it just makes sense that if every
Mhm.
subject is using a large language model, then you would need to show your work the same way you have with any other kind of math equation historically.
Yeah. Well, and I do love the example of math too, especially the new way that we're teaching math, right? Of more conceptualization or explaining it in different ways and using arrays and diagrams and visualizations and even moving different pieces around. Like there are great ways for students to explain mathematic ideas without just saying, well, it's this formula and I only know this formula and that's the only thing I know about math. So it really AI can open up a range of possibilities for students to conceptualize and understand complex ideas in very different ways.
Can we shift for a minute to the future of work? Because I do have some questions I'd love to run by you. One
Yes,
is,
please.
I hear that the skills that every kid's going to need going forward are things like critical thinking, communication, creativity, collaboration, and adaptability. Like, how do you put metrics around those things? And do those things actually look different in a hospital setting than they do in a warehouse setting? And like, how are we defining these soft skills? It seems to me like the whole consciousness thing is a really difficult conversation because we haven't defined consciousness as a
Mhm.
society to begin with. So there's no way to really argue whether or not a machine is conscious until we define consciousness. The soft skills feel the same to me. Like, how do you define critical thinking?
Yeah. So, I agree with you. I think that the soft skills are things that we've been trying to get to, and in an ideal world, that should be where our education system is based around, right? Around project-based learning, problem-based learning, investigating things and having students solve those and present solutions to those particular problems. I think sometimes our educational system has been mired down in this testing kind of paradigm that really doesn't allow us to um, explore the whole human capacity and just even making sure that everyone's at this particular level, whether that allows our gifted students to move on. My hope is that AI has actually put us into a place where it's almost serving like a Trojan horse. So it allows us to sneak in good pedagogy and have to focus on these things as opposed to being able to do fall back on the memorization parts for humans. Um, it is different. Critical thinking is different in all different fields, right? So the critical thinking that you do in history, where you're looking at persistent issues in history and being able to analyze historical documents, that looks different than the critical thinking that you might apply in a biology lab to think about whether things. I mean, there are some similarities, but in terms of most educational literature, it has shown it to be very challenging to do what's called far transfer between different subject areas. So the closer the subject areas are, the more likely you are to be able to transfer those skills and knowledge. But if I'm exceptional at putting or like thinking more mechanically, where I'm able to put together a lawnmower and figure out what's going on and do those things, that's not necessarily going to translate directly to how to even like cook something or recipes or do you know what I mean? So
I do.
the the closer the ideas are, or great educators or brilliant people that are able to see here are the here are the things, these structural pieces, and here's how they translate over here and here's how I can translate those things over there. um I think that part of the training and those parts are critically important. I would even say if we're talking about collaboration, right? My collaboration in a room where I feel confident and I have all of these capabilities. If I'm with my colleagues, that looks much different than if I go into a separate space with other moms, right? Collaborating around something different. It takes different skill sets to move and almost like code switch from one place to another. So maybe that's the other piece of these durable human skills is also building in flexibility and constant learning. And how do I become an expert? If I'm really good mechanically, how do I become an expert and use AI to help me figure out what's going on with my recipe or whatever's working or what's not working, right? Um, so I think that those parts of figuring out how do you use the tools that we have to our best advantages to help us reach the next level of skill sets as humans.
Yeah, I've done a lot of thinking about this because a lot of times I will hear something and I'll think I just cannot wrap up my mind around. Well, I'll use AI for an example. Agentic loops. When OpenClaw first came out and people started running agentic loops on their computers, I'm like, why would I want an agent spinning up anything all night long while I'm asleep, and costing me money? Like, I just couldn't find a use case. Now, I work for a vertical AI company that has an application that helps people navigate wraparound services. We have agentic loops that are continuously crawling for updates on those services. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, that makes sense to me. So with the
Right.
soft skill, pardon me, go ahead.
Oh no, that's right. Yes, keep going. Sorry.
No, but with the soft skills, I've kept thinking and kept thinking, and what I've really come up with is maybe it's not the right framework. Maybe what we need to lean into is design thinking, project management, the things that teach those no matter what industry you're in. Right, design thinking is very useful in this AI world. Being able to frame a problem, empathize with the end user, identify the stakeholders, empathize with the end user, prototype, iterate, divergent thinking, convergent thinking, like that fits into AI really well. Project management forces you to say, okay, if I have a team of people and they all have different personalities, I'm going to have to learn how to best communicate with these different personalities, whether it's in the same room or like the company I work for, the rest of my crew is in San Francisco. So we're virtual most of the time, right? And I'm very comfortable with human beings, but I also have to be comfortable in a digital setting doing those kinds of things. So I do think there might be some redesign that can help develop those skills without targeting them, if that makes sense. That's just kind
It
of where I'm
does.
at.
Yeah, I think so. Let me push back for a second because even though I completely agree with you, just playing devil's advocate, I have been using AI a lot more to help me project manage, right? Because that is, it's not necessarily. I think I'm really good at a lot of things, especially around like instructional design and thinking through those problems. But thinking through what are all of the different steps of in order to manage a project and to do all of these things, it's just hard for me to sometimes keep track. So I've asked the AI to become an expert project manager and to be also take on the role of like a McKinsey consultant to like pull out all of these ideas and things. And so the AI is actually doing the project management pieces for me and pulling out my knowledge and skill set. Because the one thing that I am worried about is I obviously, like, a PhD in this particular area, I obviously have a lot of expertise in this part. But then when it comes down to if I have to look at doing a marketing plan, right, or communication plan, like I know a little bit, but it's definitely not my area of expertise. And so the things that it's suggesting back, I, I think it sounds good and I think it's good, but it's probably not as good as someone who has expertise in marketing and communications is going to be able to create, right? With the AI. So I think for me, it comes down to this: what is the amount of knowledge and what are the skill sets that we as humans need to have in order to best take advantage of these tools? And how do we continue to develop those human skills and capabilities when we are using AI?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, and it actually brings up another conversation that I had today with a friend who works for Ivy Tech and does a lot of the career connections. We were talking about jobs that probably are going to disappear fairly rapidly,
Mhm.
in our opinion. Accounting, like some of the paralegal, there are some jobs that AI can just do today fairly well. And she brought up HR, and I said I don't think HR is going to disappear at all. I think HR is going to change a lot because what I hear you talking about is managing not only other human beings, but a workforce of agents as well. And so, like, what
Mhm.
does the org chart look like? How does that play out? How do I establish evaluate? I think red teaming and evals are like huge places where if kids lean into learning how to either do data security, which not everybody's into cybersecurity, right? It's definitely a place where there's a good future. It would not be my cup of tea at all, but if that's what you're into, man, go for it. Like you will do well. But I do think like evals. I've even gone to a few conferences with people from Figma and some of these more creatives, and they're like, yeah, you can use agents, but you have to learn how to give them the right rubrics and have them evaluate things, because this is so different from machine learning. Machine learning, you could say every quarter, we're going to take a look at this machine learning process and make sure that it's on track. When you
Mhm.
have large language models plugged in there that are connected to a foundation model that they can change the weights or the system card on at any given time, and it will completely change the behavior of what you've created. Like now, how do you manage that as a human being, and how do you manage humans at the same time? I think that's going to be a very interesting thing to watch.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, rapid fire, then I'll let you go.
Yes.
Just a few future things. Like let's just start with the org chart. How do you see the traditional org chart changing in the next 5 years?
I see there being hopefully some more spaces for like innovation tiger teams, right? So that you have people that are coming in that are going to be able to help you think about your current process, and how AI might be applied to that. But then also people helping you think through how to improve that process, right? Like that's the other thing about AI that I think is just absolutely wild is it amplifies whatever you put into it, right? So if you have a broken system, it is going to amplify that broken system. If you have a system that is working well, then it's going to amplify that working well system. So I do think having some of these tiger teams that are really looking at what is it that we do, what is the goal that we want to accomplish, is it a worthwhile goal? How do we help people move faster in order to get to that goal? So I think that's how I'd love to see it change. I don't know that that will have to uh, pursue for that long a period of time, but I can't fathom what the AI is going to what it's going to look like or do. I know Murr's Law, we always think that change, long-term change or that change is going to happen a lot quicker, or the short term we overestimate the short term change and we underestimate the long term change, right? So the short term change, I think people have been frantic about, like jobs are going to be lost and all of these things. I think things will change, but it'll definitely be, I think, in about 10 years that we'll see a much more dramatic change in what this looks like and what it can do. Um, so is that I think
That's
that's
yeah, no, that's good. I have a couple more. Philosophy. It seems to me like philosophy, you might actually be able to get a job with a bachelor's in philosophy that's not just teaching going forward.
You absolutely can. In fact, we have a PhD student in philosophy right now who is the chief, or there's some kind of ethics officer for Cummins. So we're seeing a lot more of our philosophy majors, and the what you brought up about Notre Dame, they have the Delta framework, right, which was actually developed by one of their amazing philosophy professors. Um, so it's all of these notions about thinking around what is the role of machines, what should they be doing, how does that impact our humanity, what are we looking at when we're trying to become humans. So the notion of ethics and technology's involvement in those ethics, I think that's a huge potential space.
Amanda Askell, right? The head philosopher for Anthropic. I would love to see what her salary is. I guarantee it's the highest of any philosopher ever. And she wrote the Claude Soul doc. I think it's very interesting to see that some of these emergent properties in large language models seem to be curbed by giving them almost like doing the same. Don't do as I say. Do.
Right.
Here's why you should do these types of things. That whole field is absolutely amazing. The place where we seem to be lagging behind behind some of the world, China in particular, is robotics. How do you think that the ChatGPT moment for robotics is coming soon, or is it still another 5, 6 years away?
Uh, I I hope that it's coming soon. And actually, Indiana is one of the top robotics for K-12. We're one of the top robotics participants, or have the most robotics teams um, out of any other state. I think I'm not going to be able to quote it correctly, but we have more than most countries just in our little state of Indiana that enter into some of these robotics competitions. Um, so I do think that robotics will have more of its moment here as we move through a little bit more. We've just focused so heavily on language models. So yes, I do think that it's coming up. I think as we see more with self-driving cars, I think that that opens up the door of possibilities for us. And just like Purdue, like Indiana University also has those robotic delivery types of trucks and things like that. I think
Yes.
our our big constraint maybe is also how vast and wild, and how we don't necessarily how living in large cities is not as pervasive maybe in the US too. So
Have you ridden a Waymo?
I have not.
It's
But
pretty cool.
I have ridden in folks' cars that are fairly self-driving. So
Yeah, and I was at Purdue not too long ago, leaving the campus, and the lidar on the little robot, the little delivery robot, was like having it stop way with cars way too far away, and one of the students was yelling, "It's okay, little robot, you can cross. It's okay." And I just it lit my heart up. But how about quantum? I mean, because that could be a huge game changer, right? But we've been hearing that quantum is going to change the world for 20 years. As long as Elon's been saying Tesla's going to be full self drive, and yet I haven't yet to have seen true evidence of it.
yeah, and honestly, I don't have as much context to add for the quantum discussion. I do know at Indiana University we have a quantum research group that's focusing on what that looks like and how it's utilized in different areas. Um, so, and then there's also one of my other colleagues has done some K-12 work in quantum computing, Diana Franklin up at University of Chicago. So there's some interesting curriculum to help students better understand quantum computing.
It's okay. Last question. And then I'm going to kind of frame this as Ray Kurzweil, who has been very, very right for a lot of years. About 70% of his predictions going back 30 years have come to fruition right around the timeline. And I just heard him on an interview yesterday. He's getting old, but he still holds to artificial general intelligence 2028. And Demis Hassabis, who I absolutely love and who I don't find makes that many inflammatory statements the way that some of the other tech guys do, did finish Google I/O the other day saying, "I think when we look back on this time, we're going to realize that we were standing in the foothills of the singularity." So, how much time do we have before major change hits us?
So, my friend Brad Wheeler, who was CIO at Indiana University and he's professor in the Kelley School of Business, he talks about AI um, at a rate of change. Usually, when we're talking about a rate of change, what would usually take place in 1 year. Sorry.
No, go right ahead.
What would usually take place in 1 year, AI changes in 90 days. And really, that's now down to 45 days. Like the cycle just becomes more and more rampant. Um, and so I think that it is much closer than we think it is going to be in terms of reaching whatever metric that you want to talk about, like general intelligence or
Recursive
uh,
self-improvement.
yes. Because we're already getting at that with the coding pieces, right? We already know that Claude is creating all of its own new code. Um, and so I think it's much more it'll happen sooner than we think. However, I do not think that it's going to be perfect. I think there will be a lot of things that need to be addressed and changed, and we'll find issues with it and have to walk it back a little bit, whether that is the impact on society. So you used a great example before around social media, right? And people were talking about what social media is going to do and how it's going to change. Well, I feel like now companies are starting to be held accountable, more accountable for what that's doing to students and to especially to young people, right? And it's all done on a marketing scale of, we want you to click more. Like that's what we're trying to get you to do. We want you to click more, or we want to use your data, right? So we want to see like how you respond or whatever that might look like. So I do think that there will be a reckoning too of being held accountable for the impact. My hope is that um, we're able to increase the humanity and increase the logic and increase the accountability before something goes off the rails. But in the same sense, as we're looking at, for example, self-driving cars, the fact that self-driving cars have fewer accidents than human drivers, where is the human versus the robot element in there? And how do we make sure that humans are continuously in the loop and um that it's driving the kind of society and the kind of humanity that we want it to be, as opposed to ChatGPT, like using Reddit to have it. Like maybe we put scholarly posts in there. Maybe we talk to professors that are experts in all these areas, and we train it with data that we want society. This is what we want society to look like. So I think there's differences there. So
I love that. I am going to ask one last question, though, because you just
please,
brought
yeah.
me to it, which is a really deep philosophical question. How can any species hope to control a species that at some point in time will be more intelligent than it?
Mhm. Well, so I'll use the use the case of maybe of analogy of dogs, that maybe dogs might not be as intelligent as we are, but they have a really great life. So maybe I hate to think about Wall-E, right, as the way in which humans might live or what that might look like. And that's really, I think, again, kind of worst case scenario. But if robots have kind of figured out how to make us have happier lives where we're focused on the real human pieces of it, and I'm able to engage with my children and ask them questions and spend thoughtful time with them. um I don't know, the life of a dog, laying there, getting getting fed, going on walks, and that's the joy of putting your head out the window. I don't know, it doesn't sound too bad.
No, and fair enough. And the one philosophical piece I've heard is that babies control their moms and are much less
Yeah.
intelligent. So maybe if we can develop some type of a maternal instinct in these things
Hmm.
as they go, that they will look out for our best interests always. But I tell you what, this has been a phenomenal conversation, and I really
Thank
appreciate.
you so much.
And bravo for everything that you're doing down there at IU and the work that you do in K through 12. Like, please keep it up because the children are our future. And
100%.
it's funny because we thought we always think every generation is going to ruin everything, and they end up improving it. Like, work-life balance is better because of millennials. And I'm sure that AI adoption will be better because of Gen Z and Gen Alpha somewhere down the road. But they definitely need some strong people like you steering them in that direction as they go.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Really, really enjoyed the conversation as well.
Awesome.
Whoa, man. Did things just get real? Looks like this dude's riffing on 11 Labs. Is this guy using 11 Labs? And I wonder what model he'll work with next week? Yeah, ride that wave.